In a tiny village encircled by lush hills and fields, there resided a princess named Amina. Her father, King Chuka, governed this village. Amina was the eldest daughter of the king and was recognized for her kindness and gentle nature, treating the villagers with respect. However, Amina faced a significant challenge throughout her life. She had a strong body odor that was quite unpleasant. Even as a young girl, she smelled worse than her peers, and as she grew older, the odor became more pronounced, trailing behind her wherever she went. As Amina matured into a young woman, the villagers began to treat her differently, avoiding her due to her odor. Behind her back, some villagers made hurtful jokes about her smell, and mothers would quickly pull their children inside when they saw her approaching. Friends from her youth would turn away to avoid her, which left Amina feeling very sad and isolated. Many young men from the village and nearby kingdoms were interested in courting her because of her beauty and royal status. But as soon as they got close, they were repelled by her odor and chose not to pursue her, leaving Amina feeling lonely. She began to spend most of her days in her palace room, gazing out the window and dreaming of true love, hoping to find someone who would accept her despite her odor. She imagined a husband who would love her for her kind heart, but it felt like an impossible dream, and she often cried over her loneliness. One hot summer day, while Amina was in her castle room, she heard joyful sounds from the village square, drumming and laughter. Curious, she leaned out her window and saw people dancing around a bonfire, celebrating the summer festival. Excited, she thought about sneaking out to join them unnoticed, as the villagers seemed too happy to notice her. Quietly, she left the palace and tiptoed to the village square, where for a moment no one realized she had joined the festivities. Amina stood in the shadows, watching the girls her age twirl in their colorful skirts. However, a breeze carried her unfortunate odor through the crowd, causing people to wrinkle their noses and look around for the source of the smell. The drumming and dancing stopped as all eyes turned to the lonely princess, mouths agape in shock, before twisting into disgust. People doubled over, gagging, and whispered behind their hands while pointing at Amina. The carefree joy of the moment vanished, and Amina's eyes filled with tears of humiliation. Feeling utterly embarrassed, she ran away from the crowd and hid behind some bushes, trembling and hoping no one would find her. But then she heard the steady beat of a drum growing louder and closer. Fearfully, she peeked through the leaves and was surprised to see a smiling young man from a neighboring village, cheerfully playing a hand drum as he walked toward her hiding spot. When he reached her, he stopped playing and kindly asked, "Why did you stop dancing? You looked so joyful and free." Amina was stunned that this stranger had followed her, especially since he could smell her unusual scent. She replied incredulously, "You can smell me, and yet you still came looking for me? Everyone in my village teases me and laughs at my dancing." The young man gently responded, "Don't worry about them. I think you're a wonderful dancer. Please ignore their unkind words and keep dancing with happiness and freedom." Amina was taken aback by his kindness and realized he truly didn't care about her differences. Comforted, she decided to ignore the cruel taunts of her neighbors and dance freely as she wished. The young man began playing a cheerful rhythm on his drum. Amina hesitated at first, but soon she started swaying lightly to the music. The stranger's smile widened as he watched her move, and he picked up the pace of his drumming, playing faster while keeping his warm gaze on her. Amina felt that he was truly seeing her, not just her appearance, but her heart and soul. For the first time, she felt completely accepted just as she was. This realization freed her spirit, and she let go of her self-consciousness, dancing fluidly with graceful motions that left her breathless and elated. As the drumming accelerated, Amina's feet flew faster. She leapt and spun with ease, weaving intricate steps that came to her instinctively. The rhythm flowed through her, filling her with joy and vitality. With the stranger's admiring gaze holding hers, she felt liberated to fully express her love of dance. When Princess Amina finally Stop dancing. She and the smiling stranger held each other's gaze for a moment. Amina felt exhilarated from the joyful dancing and uplifted by the first time she had felt truly seen and accepted by someone. They suddenly burst into laughter, connecting in their shared happiness. After catching their breath, the young man introduced himself as Aaron, a drummer from a nearby village who played at events and celebrations. He asked Amina if she would meet him in the same spot the next day, wanting to talk more and perhaps play his drums for her to dance again. His warm smile and enthusiasm made it clear he had enjoyed their time together. Princess Amina eagerly agreed to meet Aaron again, feeling lighter and happier than she had in years. All her life she had been shunned and lonely due to her odor, but this stranger had accepted her and even delighted in her dancing. Amina hurried home, her head spinning with joy at having met someone who wanted to see her again. For the first time, she had made a real friend, and her heart swelled with optimism about their next meeting. In the following weeks, Amina's meetings with Aaron became the highlight of her days. Each afternoon, she would sneak away to their secret spot in the bushes, where Aaron would be waiting with his drums. They enjoyed long, lively conversations, sharing stories and jokes that had them laughing for hours. While they talked, Aaron often played energetic rhythms that inspired Amina to dance with a freedom and joy she had never known. She let go of her self-consciousness about her lingering odor when she was around Aaron. He made her feel accepted, allowing her to lose herself in the music. Her wild, uninhibited dancing deepened their connection. As Amina twirled past Aaron, he looked at her with admiration for her spirit, beauty, and essence. Over several weeks, their bond grew into a deep friendship and then blossomed into warm affection. Amina fell in love with Aaron, and she felt his caring for her in return. However, a part of her ached secretly because of their differing social statuses. He a common musician, and she a sheltered royal with obligations to marry well for political reasons. She assumed a future together was impossible, even though she desperately wished in her private dreams that social status would not interfere and that they could be united in marriage. One afternoon, as Amina and Aaron sat closely, talking and laughing as usual, he gently took both of her hands in his. His expression turned serious and full of emotion as he told Amina that he cared for her deeply and wanted them to be together, forever. He asked her to marry him, expressing his wish that their two villages could be joined through their union. Aaron said he didn't care about royal customs or getting permission. He only knew that being with Amina made him truly happy, and he wanted them to build a life together in love. Princess Amina was overwhelmed with joy at his heartfelt proposal. She cried tears of happiness, having wanted nothing more than to be Aaron's wife, but she had assumed it could never happen. Amina felt unworthy of such a wonderful man willing to overcome all social barriers to declare his unconditional love for her. In her excitement, Amina threw her arms around Aaron, whispering yes against his smiling lips as they shared a long, tender kiss. She had never imagined a love so freeing could be hers. When they finally pulled back, their faces flushed and beaming. With joy, the lovers made enthusiastic plans, still high on new possibilities. They agreed they must share the wonderful news with both of their families right away. They would first ask Amina's parents, the king and queen, for permission to marry, then travel to Aaron's village to gain his family's approval and blessing too. The ecstatic pair clasped hands tightly as they set off on their new journey together toward a future as husband and wife. However, soon after their engagement, immense tragedy struck the villages, and Princess Amina's happy new world came crashing down. A deadly, fast-spreading plague swept through the countryside. The early symptoms included a raging fever and skin covered in large, boil-like blisters. Within days, those infected would go into violent fits of madness and then fall deathly still. It was a horrific and painful way to die. In desperate efforts to contain the terrifying outbreak, leaders of the 4 neighboring villages decided to completely seal off their borders. No one was permitted to travel between the towns for any reason. If villagers tried to flee, they would be captured and quarantined, or even killed on sight by fearful guards. As the plague raged on, week after week, residents hid in their homes, terrified to interact with anyone who might be infected. Friends and neighbors boarded up their doors and windows, only emerging briefly for provisions before scurrying back into self-imposed isolation. For Princess Amina, weeks turned into months of being cut off entirely from her beloved Aran. She was trapped within the palace as the plague circled hungrily. All of Amina's hopeful joy about the future with Aran faded into a daily fear for his safety, with no way to reach him. The villages remained frozen in quarantine for endless months as the plague ran its course. Amina and Aran could only pray that the other was still alive. Eventually, Princess Amina awoke feverish, with terrifying red boils beginning to spread across her arms. The plague had reached her. Over the following days, she grew gravely ill. Her body racked with fevers so severe that her dressing gown and bedsheets were constantly soaked with sweat. The crushing fatigue from fighting the illness left her too weak to even lift her head for sips of water. Seeing their eldest daughter suffer was agonizing for the king and queen. They desperately tried every traditional remedy and modern medicine the royal doctor offered, from herbal baths to poultices meant to draw out the disease, but nothing worked to ease Amina's worsening condition. The situation became dire as the ghostly, pale, and motionless princess seemed to slip away before their eyes. Finally, in despair, the queen recalled an obscure tonic an old village woman had once brewed when Amina was little. Though repulsed, she had the doctor mix the potion made of bitter roots and weeks-old animal blood. They gently spooned the revolting concoction into Amina's mouth. Miraculously, just a day later, the princess finally stirred. Over the next week, under round-the-clock care, the strange medicine, along with the queen's loving touch, slowly brought Amina back from the brink. Though still very frail, Princess Amina had survived the illness that had killed many others. Overjoyed, her parents wept thankful tears as their daughter's fever broke fully, and she managed her first meal. After several more days of rest and recovery, Princess Amina finally felt strong enough to carefully stand up from her sickbed. Still quite unsteady on her feet after so long lying down, she shuffled slowly across the room, one hand trailing the wall for balance. Amina made her way to the full-length mirror standing in the corner. As she peered anxiously at her reflection, the princess gasped in shock. She barely recognized herself. The plague's vicious fever had tormented her body for so many days that her skin now looked fresher and more supple than she could ever remember. Turning in profile, she found with joy that, most incredibly, as Amina lifted her arm hesitantly to her nose for a sniff, she discovered not a hint of her chronic, lifelong body odor lingered anymore. The prolonged, feverish sweating must have somehow purged the smell entirely from her pores. Princess Amina let out an ecstatic laugh, twirling experimentally while inhaling her now sweet-scented skin in delighted disbelief. This wonderful cure felt like a miracle. Words couldn't express her euphoria at finally being free of the odor that had plagued and isolated her since childhood. Nearly weeping with happiness, Amina rushed excitedly to share the glorious news with her parents, the king and queen. She wanted everyone to know immediately that the infection which had nearly killed her had instead brought astonishing new confidence and joy into her life. After many more months, the rampant plague began to die down, and the strict quarantines on the villages could finally be lifted. As Princess Amina walked through the main gate of the castle for the first time in over a year, she held her breath, nervously. She still vividly remembered the last time she had tried to join festivities in town, only to be met with the usual cruel recoils, whispered insults, and people pulling their children away to avoid her stench. But amazingly today, no one shied away from Amina's approach. Villagers paused in their revived marketplace to gaze in admiration as the princess floated by. Amina was startled to hear praises called out for her graceful bearing and glowing health. Some even cautiously stepped closer, wide-eyed, drinking in her beauty, looking entranced by her presence. The local young men, in particular, couldn't seem to stop boldly watching the princess's every move, their mouths hanging open, with affection. For the first time she could recall, Amina moved through her kingdom feeling strong, confident, and truly accepted. It seemed that over the course of the plague's horrors, her cured odor and newfound confidence had transformed her into a village belle that no one could ignore. Princess Amina was dizzy with the thrill of acceptance and admiration from villagers she used to hide from. Caught up in self-pride over her cured odor and newfound beauty, she nearly forgot her loyal love, Aaron. But as she walked through town, she spotted a familiar figure bounding eagerly down the road toward her. It was Aaron, her dear friend, companion, and fiancé, whom she hadn't seen in over a year since the plague hit. Amina's first impulse was to run straight into his arms with teary relief for his safety, but she caught herself short, doubts surfacing. Surely now she was too high above someone of common status like Aaron. She was a pampered royal, and he was a drummer boy without notable wealth or family name to elevate him. Thoughts swirling into insecurity, the princess composed her face into a formal, distant mask before Aaron could reach her. When he did, the drummer boy was grinning fit to burst, desperate delight shining through as he cried, "My princess! How I have missed basking in your beauty and radiance!" He moved toward her as if expecting a warm embrace, but Amina stood, reserved and still, making no move to welcome him back after their long separation. Aaron joyfully stepped forward to hug Princess Amina, so thankful to see his beloved fiancé again after agonizing months apart, but the princess recoiled sharply from his open arms. A look of deep surprise and hurt flashed across Aaron's face at her rejection. Confused, he searched her now cold eyes questioningly in sharp, cutting tones, not like her warm voice of old. Amina stated that she no longer wished to continue their relationship. She told him that after enduring the plague's terrors and emerging, more beautiful than ever, she now moved in different, higher social realms than a common boy like Aaron ever could. Aaron looked deeply hurt by Amina's harsh words, his anguish evident on his face. "But Amina, I love you," he protested passionately. "These months of silence only made me love you more. I'd do anything to make you my wife." Princess Amina met his gaze with a fiery glare. "You will address me as Princess Amina," she commanded coldly. "This conversation ends here. I deserve someone better than you." She spat out the words, feeling a cruel satisfaction in them. Then, without a backward glance or a pause to listen to his heartbroken cries, she swiftly turned away, marching off with determination. She blocked out Aaron's anguish, her chin held high, popping her fancy clothes and demeanor to hide the pain she felt inside. In Amina's mind, cutting off their connection so abruptly closed that chapter of her life for good. Now she had plenty of noble suitors vying for her attention. In the following months, the increasingly vain princess continued with court life, acting as though the humble drummer boy Aaron had never touched her heart. She entertained extravagant marriage proposals from respected lords and princes one after another. These influential men had once turned away from Amina in disgust, but now shamelessly showered her with flattery, eager for the attention of the newly transformed princess. Amina grinned as she soaked up their compliments about her flawless skin, graceful movements, and regal demeanor. Praises she could never have imagined receiving before. Despite the adoration, she couldn't shake the regret gnawing at her heart for pushing Aaron away so harshly. As weeks passed, King Chuka urged Princess Amina to quickly choose a husband from the numerous suitors vying for her hand before rumors damaged her marriage prospects. Wanting all eyes on her, Amina declared she would host a wrestling tournament where the kingdom's strongest men would compete for the chance to marry her. Upon hearing this, men of great strength traveled from far and wide, eager for the opportunity to win the hand of the renowned beauty. In the days leading up to the tournament, Amina became obsessed with enhancing her appearance to outshine everyone. Her maids tirelessly groomed her, but in her pursuit of outer perfection, Amina neglected basic cleanliness, even forgoing regular baths. Slowly but surely, Amina's old body odor returned. On the morning of the wrestling tournament, the weather was perfect, providing an ideal backdrop to showcase Princess Amina's beauty. She entered the bustling arena adorned in shimmering silks and jewels, aiming to dazzle the crowd. As Amina lifted her delicate hand to wave at the cheering crowd, their excitement suddenly changed. A surprised whisper spread quickly among the people, and they moved away in disgust, wrinkling their noses at the strong smell coming from the princess. Embarrassed, men hid their faces, looking away to avoid eye contact. Princess Amina felt deeply humiliated when the tournament participants shook their heads and left, wanting to avoid her. The villagers watching the tournament also followed suit, talking quietly about her body odor and holding their noses in disgust. Amina felt utterly crushed and ashamed. She quickly removed her fancy royal clothes and jewelry, dropping them in the dirt. With tears in her eyes, she turned and ran away as fast as she could. As Amina ran, her eyes landed on one person standing, alone across the tournament grounds, Aaron. He stood tall and straight, looking at her with kindness as she hurried away. After a moment, Aaron walked purposefully toward her, his face showing both concern and sadness for her distress. When Aaron reached Amina, he spoke gently. "My dear precious one, how could you think so little of our love and what we meant to each other? Why would you give up our bond for the fleeting attention of others?" Tears rolled down Amina's cheeks as she shook her head. "Please forgive me, Aaron. I made a terrible mistake thinking that looking beautiful on the outside was more important than our love. I was vain and careless, and now I've lost the most important thing in my life, your love and care. I am marrying the prince, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. The reward is enough for you to start a new life or marry one of my other sisters. Please, my darling Aaron, this is a huge opportunity for me." After hosting a wrestling tournament where she was humiliated, Princess Amina felt deeply embarrassed as the participants shook their heads and walked away, wanting to avoid her. The villagers watching the tournament also left, whispering about her body odor and holding their noses in disgust as they exited the tournament grounds. Aaron approached her with purpose, his face conveying both concern and sadness for her distress. Amina apologized for all her wrongdoings. Aaron pulled her into a comforting embrace, nuzzling into her shoulder. "I have forgiven you, and I want to be with you. I don't care what people will say. I love you from the rising of the sun to its setting. I don't care about your father's wealth or heritage. All I want is you. Come away with me," Aaron whispered. Amina looked up to see the same joyful drummer from the bushes, love and hope shining in his eyes. With delightful laughter, Amina once again smelled only warmth and comfort instead of the disgust from the villagers. No splendid royal ball or fawning attention from kings could replace this feeling of home and belonging with Aaron. She took his hand, and Aaron walked Amina home. They both agreed to meet the next day. Aaron left for his village that night. Princess Amina rested uneasily in her chambers, her mind plagued by distressing thoughts. She kept replaying the utter humiliation she had endured earlier that day at the wrestling tournament when her severe body odor had suddenly returned. The crowd had turned on Amina viciously. She vividly remembered their cruel taunts, pointing fingers, disgusted scowls, and the way they all shrank away, covering their noses in revulsion. Hot tears spilled down Amina's cheeks as she recalled a rotten tomato striking her shoulder, hurled by some hateful village boy, followed by peals of laughter. Amina felt completely crushed. She had worked so hard to make herself beautiful and desirable with lovely gowns and jewels in hopes of making a fine match. but it had all been thrown back in her face when her curse of foul-smelling affliction returned without warning. Yet, Amina's weeping softened as she reflected on how her dear Aaron had rushed to embrace her after she fled the chaotic scene when no one else would come near her putrid odor. He alone had wrapped her shaking body tight in his arms, whispering comforting words in her ear. Aaron still loved her in spite of everything. Amina knew she must get to the root of why this curse kept coming back. She resolved to go right away, to speak with her father, King Chuka, for as monarch, he possessed knowledge of how this plaguing curse befell her so long ago. There must be more she could try to break its cruel hold over her. Amina rose swiftly from her ornate bed and tucked her nightrobe tight around her frame. She lit an oil lamp to light her way through the shadowy corridors and slipped out into the darkness. The night air was warm, filled with the chatter of crickets and the flutter of moths. Amina followed the stone path briskly to her father's private chambers. Knocking lightly, she called through the carved wooden door, "Father, I apologize for disturbing you so late, but I desperately need answers." "Come in, my child," the muffled reply came. Princess Amina turned the brass handle and entered softly. There she found the king sitting at his desk, brow furrowed, surrounded by scattered parchments. He seemed to be puzzling over something. "You also cannot sleep?" Amina asked. "No, I am distressed by what happened to you today," he said heavily, shaking his head. "Please, daughter, come sit beside me." The king shifted his chair toward Amina, taking both her delicate hands in his weathered ones. Once she settled next to him, his eyes searched her face sadly. Amina took a breath. "Father, I hoped speaking with you might finally help me understand why I have been cursed with this hideous odor since childhood. Surely you know the full tale. I beg you, please help me comprehend why I am tormented so." Squeezing his daughter's hands, the king spoke slowly. "Dearest Amina, there is a painful story from your childhood that I must share, though it breaks my heart to tell it. It is time you learned the whole truth of events long ago, and how they shaped the sorrows of today. You see, when you were just a young carefree girl of 7, your mother, the queen, decided to take you into the village one bright summer morning. She felt it was important for you to see more of the kingdom you would one day rule. As the two of you were strolling along, you came across an impoverished beggar woman pleading desperately for money and food. The poor woman had her own tiny daughter by her side, a girl who seemed around the same age as you. Their clothes were dirty and torn, hanging loosely on their thin, hungry bodies. The little beggar girl's ribs showed through her torn clothes. They looked tired and desperate. My dear, but you were just an innocent girl who didn't understand what it was like to be poor. When the beggar woman saw you and your mother dressed in fine clothes and jewelry, hope appeared in her tired eyes. She quickly came over and knelt before you, pleading, "My noble queen and lovely young princess, my daughter and I are very poor and hungry. We haven't eaten in almost 5 days, and we're starving. Please, could you give us some coins or scraps of bread so we don't die?" At that moment, the poor little beggar girl, amazed by the sight of you, a beautiful princess, ran forward and hugged you. My dear, I know you didn't mean any harm. You were just scared by the sudden embrace from a strange, dirty child. But in your panic, you pushed the little girl away from you because her ragged clothes touched your fine silk dress. Your royal hands pushed the small girl to the ground. As she looked up at you with confused, teary eyes, you said cruel things I can't forget. "Disgusting wretch," you shouted. "How dare your dirty hands touch me? You stink. Your smell is awful." In your disgust, you even hit the little beggar girl hard on her face, then spat at the poor woman still kneeling before your mother, asking for help. "Disgusting beggars," you yelled. "Stay away. Leave us alone." Trying to escape a situation you couldn't understand, You grabbed your mother's arm and pulled her away back to the palace gates without looking back. I can't forget the shame and regret I feel for not being there that day to guide you both on how royalty should have compassion for the suffering of our people. There, on her knees in the dirt, the broken beggar woman cried out in pain, a sound that still echoes in my troubled dreams. Tears filled her eyes as the distressed little girl held on to her mother tightly, even as you walked away. My daughter, the beggar woman looked up to the sky and cried out, "Beautiful Princess Amina, because of your unnecessary unkindness to my innocent, hungry child, today you will be cursed. From now on, for the rest of your life, you will have the worst body odor imaginable. It will be so awful, so horrible, that no one will want to be near you. This kingdom, which has spoiled you as its darling princess, will turn against you. People will laugh and make fun of you. Whether you're lovely or not, you will feel embarrassed and alone until your last breath." Then the beggar woman seemed to transform. Though she still looked tired, she stood tall, her face showing a strange power. Despite her ragged clothes, she said, "I am Izumba, the respected goddess of your ancestors. I came as a poor person to see if you, a royal, were kind, but you failed to show kindness. So now, spoiled princess, the heavens decide that my curse will be with you forever." With those words, lightning flashed and thunder boomed. The beggar woman and her daughter vanished in the wind as if they were made of dust. At the same time, you, my dear, fell to the ground unconscious from the goddess's curse. I cried in fear as the guards carried you back to the palace. We called upon all the kingdom's priests, healers, magicians, and doctors to try to save you, chanting old spells day and night, hoping to bring back a glimmer of hope that we hadn't lost you forever. Thankfully, after 3 days of continuous care and attention, you finally opened your eyes, my child. But our happiness at your waking quickly turned into shock and sadness, mixed with the worst smell any of us had ever experienced. A terrible choking odor came from your body, spreading through every part of your room. We found out that the beggar woman was actually a goddess in disguise. Her curse affected you, my daughter. You were left with the worst body odor imaginable for your whole life. Despite all the remedies the kingdom tried, potions, salves, prayers, and ceremonies, nothing could make it better. We hoped to calm the angry spirit of Izumba, but everything we tried failed. You, my child, suffered in lonely isolation because of one moment of selfishness that went too far. You not only endured the misery of your condition, but we also saw how the people's feelings toward their beloved princess turned from love to disgust, then neglect, mockery, and even cruelty from those who used to adore you. It was a painful transformation caused by a single thoughtless act. It's been constant suffering since that fate turned against us long ago, not because of any initial fault of yours, but because you lacked the gentle guidance you needed. And now here we are, both grieving souls. Much time has passed, but our regret feels as fresh as the day the beggar goddess cursed us. I should have spent more time teaching you that compassion must be learned early in life. Now this painful lesson comes too late and at too high a cost for both of us. This truth troubles me when I can't sleep. I hold on to the hope that in the years to come, you might find a chance to learn and grow from your suffering, maybe even help others if fate allows. Even the toughest situations might change with time. We must keep going, my daughter, despite the bad luck we faced. If we give up hope, we lose everything before we've really lived. After her father, the king, told the painful story of how Princess Amina's body odor was caused by a curse from the beggar goddess Queen Izumba, Amina sat quietly, looking at her shaking hands. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. She realized that when she was a spoiled young girl, she had been unkind because she didn't understand poverty. Now she was cursed to always have this odor problem, no matter how hard she tried to fix it. Amina felt like something inside her broke when she understood that her life of pain and loneliness was because of one mistake she made as a child. She cried heavily, feeling incredibly alone and hopeless. She barely managed to say, "Thank you for telling me," before running out of her father's chambers, crying so much she couldn't see, with her father calling after her. Amina hurried through the dark stone corridors, trying not to make any noise that might wake the people in the palace. She ran out and didn't stop until she reached her small hut at the edge of the grounds. There, she collapsed onto her sleeping mat and gave in to her overwhelming grief and despair. She cried hard, blaming herself and feeling sorry for herself, until she fell asleep from exhaustion. As the sun began to rise the next morning, Amina woke up feeling confused for a moment, forgetting the torment of the previous day before reality hit her again. She desperately wanted to talk to her beloved Aaron, the only person who stood by her despite her frequent smell problems. Aaron fully accepted Amina, unlike everyone else. But how could Amina face him now, knowing she could never marry him without exposing him to a life of mockery and humiliation from the mean villagers? Feeling hopeless and wanting to spare the man who loved her, Amina decided to distance herself from Aaron. She knew it would break her already fragile heart to lose his constant support and love. She cried bitter tears as she prepared for this, then headed to the secluded grove in the woods where she secretly met the charming drummer boy every afternoon. When Amina arrived and saw Aaron eagerly waiting with a delighted smile, his happiness nearly made her abandon her decision entirely. Holding back tears and speaking with a shaky voice, Amina quickly explained, her voice trembling with emotion, "Aaron, I just found out why I have this terrible problem. I was cursed when I was young for being cruel, and now I'll always have this odor, so no one can love me." She took a deep breath through her tears and continued, "You're too good and deserving to be with someone like me, who's been disgraced because of my past actions." Looking at his shocked face through her tears, Amina said, "I release you from any obligation to someone cursed like me. Please go love your life happily and find another girl to love and marry instead." Aaron listened silently to Amina's painful words, his face showing deep concern. When she finished, his smile faded, replaced by sympathy. He reached out and gently held Amina's trembling hand. "My dear princess, you were just a child back then. You couldn't have known what you were doing," Aaron said softly. Amina cried even harder. "But can't you see? You're not a bad person. Can't you see I am disliked for a reason? You deserve someone better than being tied to someone like me," Aaron said quickly, moving forward to embrace the shaking, sad princess, holding her close as she broke into tears. "Hush, my dear," he comforted. "You don't need to feel guilty for things that happened long ago. We all have moments we wish we could change." Aaron gently lifted Amina's chin, meeting her teary eyes. "What matters is the kindness and compassion I see in you now. That's what tells me you've learned from your suffering." He wiped Amina's tears away. "The past may hurt, but we can find happiness in the present. I don't care what ignorant villagers say, I love you, flaws and all. I'll proudly stand by your side if you'll let me." Amina let out a shaky breath, feeling relieved and grateful that Aaron still loved her, even knowing about her past mistakes. "But doesn't it bother you that I am cursed and everyone avoids me?" she whispered uncertainly. "You may promise loyalty, but one day you might change your mind when faced with the challenges of sharing my rejected life." Aaron gently placed a finger over her lips. "I choose willingly, with no illusions. Any difficulties will be something we face together." Then he pulled Amina close again. She felt tired but suddenly hopeful, embraced in unconditional love. No more words were needed in their special quiet sanctuary in the grove. Princess Amina simply snuggled into Aaron's strong embrace, finally at peace with her revealed past. She let go of her worries, allowing them to drift away on the soft forest breeze that surrounded the devoted pair as they held on to joy and each other. In the happy weeks after Princess Amina told Aaron about her cursed condition, the two lovers became even closer and happier together. They found comfort, trust, and understanding in each other's company as their bond grew stronger. One breezy afternoon, as Aaron walked home after another wonderful meeting with Amina, he realized it was time to talk to his father about wanting to marry the princess. Aaron thought his father might object because of Amina's curse, which caused her to have a bad smell, but he hoped to appeal to his father's kind side and get his blessing. He loved Amina deeply despite her struggles and was sure of his feelings for her. When Aaron got home, he found his father, Chief Uzo, the respected healer and elder of the village, busy making potions at the wooden table. Aaron took a deep breath. "Father, can we talk? It's about Princess Amina." Chief Uzo looked up in surprise but motioned for Aaron to continue as he went back to crushing herbs with his stone pestle. Aaron spoke earnestly. "Father, even though Princess Amina has faced lifelong challenges because of a curse she got when she was young, in these past few months of secret meetings, I've come to love and care for her deeply." The drummer boy clasped his hands together, pleading, "I respectfully ask for your blessing to marry her." Chief Uzo stayed silent for a thoughtful moment before responding gently, "My son, isn't this princess meant for a life of luxury in the palace? Can you provide for someone who grew up in such privilege?" Aaron replied passionately, "Father, though Amina was born royal, a curse and scandal forced her out of the court long ago because of ignorance and heartlessness. What I see in my princess is her beautiful soul. We find joy and comfort in each other that no wealth could replace. I promise to stand by her side through everything." With this heartfelt declaration, a slow smile appeared on Chief Uzo's weathered face. He stood up and placed an approving hand on his son's shoulder. "Then she has my blessing as well, my loyal son. I believe true love can conquer all." Later, as Aaron explained Princess Amina's curse to his father, Chief Uzo's eyes lit up with inspiration. As the village's skilled spiritual healer, he wondered if the gods and ancestors might guide him to lift Amina's curse, even after years of failed attempts. Chief Uzo grabbed Aaron's shoulder eagerly. "My son, bring Princess Amina to me at the next village market in 2 days behind my herb stall. I'll perform a cleansing ritual that I believe could finally break this curse. Just bring her and let the spirits of goodwill do their ancient magic." Aaron felt a wave of relief and hope at his father's words. He thanked his wise father warmly for his blessing as he hurried back to Amina to share the joyful news that Chief Uzo agreed to their marriage and might be able to lift her curse. He prayed fervently that his father's skills would succeed where others had failed, finally freeing his beloved from her suffering. The next sunny morning, Aaron eagerly went to meet Princess Amina at their usual spot in the shaded glen. His spirits were high with hope after his father's promise to perform a powerful cleansing ritual to lift Amina's curse when the time was right. Aaron hummed happily, imagining the joy on Princess Amina's face when he shared the promising news. However, as he entered their leafy hideaway, all his pleasant thoughts vanished, replaced by awe at the sight of the beautiful princess waiting for him. Amina had already arrived and stood up gracefully from the soft grass to greet Aaron with a radiant smile and a tender kiss that made his heart flutter. After they settled comfortably together and caught up on their time apart, Aaron took both of Amina's hands and looked into her expectant eyes. "My princess, I have wonderful news," he exclaimed, unable to contain his excitement. Aaron told Amina about asking his father, Chief Uzo, for permission to marry her. "My father not only agreed to our marriage despite your struggles, but he also believes that his special healing skills might finally free you from the curse," Aaron exclaimed. He explained Chief Uzo's plan for Aaron to bring Amina to him during the next village market day. Princess Amina listened carefully, her eyes widening with cautious hope. She felt a mix of timid joy and disbelief, a glimmer of hope breaking through her resignation to a life of affliction. "Do you really believe your father can break this curse when so many powerful spells have failed?" Amina whispered, tears of fragile hope shimmering on her eyelashes. Aaron gently kissed each of her flushed cheeks and looked at her with determination. "If anyone has the ability and favor with the ancient gods to change your fate, it's my father. He comes from a long line of people who serve spiritual forces beyond our understanding." Amina let out a soft sigh, a small glimmer of hope taking root in her heart. Hand in hand, they stood up and went to tell the princess's father, King Chuka, about this ray of hope. The king listened solemnly to Aaron's hopeful story. However, he shook his head sadly, pity and regret filling his eyes. "I worry this might only prolong my daughter's heartbreak. We've tried every rumored solution, 5 kingdoms over the years, all in vain. But if this healer can spark even a glimmer of hope in Amina's eyes, I won't object," King Chuka said, giving them his blessing. Amina and Aaron barely slept that night, filled with delicate anticipation. Several days later, on the morning of the bustling village market, as Chief Uzo had planned, large crowds gathered along the grassy banks of the winding river that bordered the kingdom. News of the significant cleansing ritual for Princess Amina, to be conducted by the respected village elder and healer, Chief Uzo, had quickly spread by word of mouth and attracted multitudes. Representatives, townspeople, and merchants from all 5 surrounding kingdoms journeyed to witness the ceremony, many bringing sick relatives or friends hoping to benefit from Chief Uzo's legendary talents. Kings and high priests from kingdoms, recognizable in their gleaming robes of status, also attended with great interest, despite their own failed attempts to lift Amina's curse over the years. They came to observe. Colorfully clad female dancers, with shell-adorned anklets gathered, ready to perform. The royal drummers assembled too, prepared to play sacred beats invoking divine spirit powers. Even Princess Amina's parents, the Queen and King Chuka, quietly joined the gathered crowd. Finally, Chief Uzo appeared, wearing a majestic feathered crown representing his ancestral authority and leopard print clothing showing his command of ancient mystic forces. He emerged slowly from the forest fringe by the river, surrounded respectfully by a group of muscular, bare-chested warrior guards painted with sacred white ochre clay designs. They carried jars of purified water from the river and baskets filled with ritual elements like powders made from rare rainforest roots, exotic bird feathers, elephant hide bracelets, and curved tusks from legendary sea beasts. Princess Amina sat gracefully beside him on a woven reed mat, wearing a soft ivory gown. However, her eyes showed her anxiety. Aaron knelt behind her, holding her shoulders firmly. Amina sought his warmth as her only comfort amid the uncertainty and memories of past disappointments. Before numerous councils of mystics, just beyond, King Chuka stood protectively with his advisors, who had come to witness any miracle for themselves. Soon, the steady beat of hide drums filled the air. "Be blessed, my children," Chief Uzo's strong voice echoed across the area. "Today we gather at this sacred river, seeking divine pardon and grace from forces once angered." He looked directly at Princess Amina, his gaze intense with faith and reverence. "I will use every power granted to me by the Creator to help this blameless young lady who has suffered for so long." In response to his words, the drummers began a complex, accelerating beat, and the dancers started their spirited routine, their bracelets jingling. Everyone watched eagerly as the tense scene unfolded at the shoreline, filled with fervent hopes. A tense silence fell over the crowd as Chief Uzo lifted his staff toward the sky, seeking divine intervention. Everyone watched closely as he lit herbs in a bowl, filling the air with a strange, sweet-smelling smoke. Then Chief Uzo began a dance, following ancient traditions passed down through generations. His chant, spoken in an ancient language, seemed to echo through the air, sending shivers down the spines of many. The sounds of the forest faded away as if paying respect to the ceremony. Princess Amina closed her eyes, overwhelmed by memories from her past. Memories of a beggar child she had once rejected and the harsh words she had spoken without remorse. Meanwhile, the other kings observed Chief Uzo's actions with solemn approval, while Amina struggled to control her emotions. After an hour of intense ritual, Chief Uzo grew weary, examining the bones and shells scattered on the ground for signs from the spirits. Unfortunately, the signs remained unclear and unfavorable. Disappointment rippled through the crowd as Uzo prepared to make a second plea. This time, an assistant drew a small amount of blood from Amina's wrist as an offering. Yet, despite their efforts, the ritual was unsuccessful. As the morning progressed, Chief Uzo continued to pour all his energy into a third and fourth dance, sprinkling rare purple powders over Amina's kneeling form. However, despite his heartfelt efforts, the crowd grew increasingly doubtful and restless. Some began to grumble, accusing Uzo of being a fraud. Amina fought back tears, feeling the familiar sting of disappointment. Aaron held her close, offering words of comfort while glaring at the hecklers. Even the dignitaries shook their heads in disbelief, unsure of what to do until the ceremony was over. Only King Chuka remained, holding on to hope that the situation would somehow change. Meanwhile, Chief Uzo felt exhausted and confused. His methods, which had always succeeded in the past, were failing him now. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Uzo drank some water brought by young Aaron and appealed to the ancestors for guidance. He realized that only love could overcome the cruelty of the curse. With newfound understanding, Uzo decided to approach the situation with raw humanity rather than relying solely on official rituals. Uzo took off his fancy clothes and went to Amina, who was sad and tired, and held her hands tightly, looking into her eyes with seriousness. In a loud voice, he called out to Queen Azumba in the sky. Instead of doing fancy dances, Uzo surprised everyone by kneeling with Amina on the muddy ground, with their heads bowed and hands together. Uzo spoke from his heart to Queen Azumba, asking her to listen to him, saying he was her humble servant. He begged her to show mercy to Princess Amina if there was any goodness left in her. After speaking, Uzo went quiet, and everyone waited anxiously, hoping for a miracle. Seconds felt like forever as they waited to see what would happen. Suddenly, strong winds rose from the calm waters, swirling around the ritual site. People gasped as spirits of ancestors appeared above the river. Then, right before Chief Uzo, a beautiful goddess emerged in a flash of bright sunlight piercing through the clouds. She wore threads of pure copper, and people shielded their eyes and turned away, recognizing the divine presence of Goddess Izumba. When the glow faded a bit, everyone looked at the goddess. Izumba spoke to Chief Uzo in a kind voice, acknowledging his devotion to Princess Amina. She looked at Amina, who trembled but met her gaze. After a moment, the goddess said, "So be it, child. Even the coldest heart can find its way to light." Then, with a gentle smile that seemed tinged with sadness, Goddess Izumba spoke. "I take back the curse I unfairly placed many years ago, in a moment of my own pain." She blessed Chief Uzo, saying, "Continue to serve your people with love. The heavens are pleased with deeds done from the heart." With these kind words still lingering in the air, Izumba's glowing form suddenly transformed back into that of a humble peasant before disappearing as quickly as she had appeared. A deep silence fell over the crowd as they absorbed the miraculous events they had just witnessed. Then, a jubilant cheer erupted as the people celebrated the merciful actions of the goddess, while Chief Uzo beamed with pride. However, amidst the joyous commotion, Princess Amina suddenly gasped and collapsed. Aaron rushed to catch her, calling out her name anxiously as her parents hurried to help revive her. At Chief Uzo's calm direction, the limp princess was swiftly moved to his secluded dwelling, away from the public eye for recovery. There, for countless anxious hours while the crowds outside slowly dispersed, Princess Amina lay eerily still on Chief Uzo's woven sleeping mat. Her distraught mother wept inconsolably against King Chukwuemeka's chest, equally distressed. But the wise healer only smiled at their worry. Be patient. The young lady's spirit undergoes a profound transformation, crossing from one reality to the next. This indicates the goddess's complete forgiveness. True to his prediction, after a full day and night of deep slumber, Princess Amina finally stirred, weak as a newborn cub. As her blurry vision cleared, she saw her beloved Aaron kneeling beside her. The princess's voice quivered with apprehension. Please, has the goddess's curse truly been lifted from me after all this time? Holding her breath, she slowly raised a trembling hand to her face. Then she gently inhaled through her nose, waiting for a few tense moments. She took another fuller breath, and then suddenly, she sat up straight in amazed delight. Princess Amina couldn't stop crying tears of joy, loudly thanking the heavens. I no longer have that awful smell. It's a miracle. Thank you, Goddesses Zumba. Chief Uzo had done the impossible. Through his strong belief and selfless acts, his ritual had finally freed Princess Amina from her curse, allowing her to embrace a future filled with love and acceptance that had been denied to her for so long. The villagers celebrated together, for days united by the marriage of two resilient souls who had grown stronger together. 6 months later, Princess Amina and Aaron were deeply in love and making plans to marry. Both of their families supported them wholeheartedly. King Chuka, Amina's father, had come to admire Aaron for his unwavering dedication to Amina. Chief Uzo, Aaron's father, had welcomed